Today on The Dead Life, I want to talk about the Lindsay Wells case. Lindsay Wells was a 22-year-old woman who was last seen March 29, 1999, in her home where she lived with her fiancé John and his mother on Granby Avenue in Simi Valley, California. As we go through this process, I'd like for you to put yourself in the shoes of a 22-year-old young woman who is 9 months pregnant. As I go through the case, I'm going to give you information that I did not see on the internet. I actually was on a true crime podcast. It's very popular, Crime Junkie AF. And Ashley Flowers, the host, asked me if there were any cases that still bothered me. And although most of the cases that I weighed in on over the years have been solved, or the remains have been found, somebody's gone to prison for the crime, it has the direction that it needed, the little nudge to give it. This was one of the cases that on my flight back to Phoenix from Indianapolis, I pulled up on my laptop. And so when I got back, I pulled up Lindsay's name to see if any leads had manifested since 2009 when I'd been there. And I was surprised to find very little on the internet posted about her disappearance or around her disappearance. So I'm going to share with you what we gathered in our investigation into Lindsay Wells' case. I was put in a unique situation to be able to interview many people connected to Lindsay. We had a lot of roadblocks to navigate when we got into Simi Valley. We were notified that John, her fiance, had checked himself into rehab, so he wasn't an option for us to talk to. So that was disappointing, being that he was the last person to be with her in the home, one of the last people to be around her. We didn't get to sit down with him, so I sat down with David, Lindsay's ex-boyfriend, the father of her first child. He was an interesting character, and I'm going to paint a picture for you. So as we go through the details, you can sort of feel whether or not certain pieces of information make sense to you, if they don't feel right to you, just to get your own original sense of what you think, what your sense is as I go through this case. David was a young man when I sat down with him. So this would have been 10 years after she disappeared. So that put him somewhere in his early 30s, because that's how old Lindsay would have been. Lindsay and David had met in junior high. They had been boyfriend and girlfriend ever since, all the way through high school, on and off. And they had a daughter who at the time of her disappearance was 3.5 years old. I sat down with David, and he seemed very friendly and curious as to what he could give us information-wise that would be of help to us. I was hopeful that he would say something that would lead us in a direction that would warm up this cold case, because this case seems to have just died soon after Lindsay disappeared. He had a lot to share with us. He talked about them drifting apart. He had gone to jail somewhere around the age of 18, and they just lost contact and moved in different directions with their lives. We'll get back to David in a minute. Next, I want to introduce to you Donna. Donna is Lindsay's mother. Donna was very brokenhearted when I met her. She brought me to tears by the end of the interview. Just being a mother myself with daughters especially, I was really able to relate to her in the sense of the fear and the helplessness you would feel if your child went missing, and the worry she had for Lindsay and the desire to get her back and to have her home. So she told me that Lindsay was having trouble walking. So she thought it would be very hard for her to have walked away, considering the fact that she didn't have a car. I asked her if John and Lindsay got along. Donna said they argued a lot. Then I asked if he had stayed in touch with Donna since Lindsay's disappearance, and she said, I haven't heard from him since the week that Lindsay disappeared. I found that incredibly suspicious because most men whose pregnant fiance disappears would be frantic to search for their fiance and child. You'd stay close to her family for updates on the case, and just out of sheer care, love, and affection for your missing fiance who disappeared into thin air. So in my conversation with Donna, I, other than the pain that she exuded of missing her daughter and what happened to the unborn little boy that Lindsay was carrying at the time, the frustration she had of getting no help from the person who supposedly loved Lindsay the most around the time of her disappearance, which was the father of that unborn son, her fiance, her protector, the man she lived with. Next, I want to introduce you to Miles. Miles was a friend of John's. So Miles was friends with the fiance of Lindsay. My investigative partner and I were able to sit down with Miles, who he was almost somebody you would think you could like. If I didn't know people so well, he may have been able to have manipulated me into thinking he was a good guy. The way that I can sum him up is he felt as though he was sizing up the energy of my investigator and myself, which is understandable. He was nervous. We asked to sit down and talk to him, to interview him. He walked in with his baseball cap on backwards, his glasses on, his sunglasses. He took them off to speak with us and shook our hands, and I immediately got a feeling from him that this was the guy that we needed to be talking to. Sitting down with David was great, and I learned a lot about Lindsay and their relationship, and as well as their daughter. Miles felt as though he could be somebody that either knowingly is aware of information that could help solve this case, or unknowingly has the information that could help us to solve Lindsay's case. Either way, he felt very important to me to talk to. So David told us earlier that Miles tried to wear a wire on him and set him up in prison for Lindsay's murder. Think about that. This town, it seems like this is a small group of people, not the town itself, but Lindsay's social circle seems to be very interconnected. The fact that Miles and David happened to be in jail together. So he got wired up, I would assume, by the police. I can't see how else he would have gotten that kind of contraband in there to try and record David confessing to Lindsay's disappearance. So I found that interesting. So I want you to put a bookmark there on the wearing the wire into prison to try and get something that implicates David recorded on the device that Miles was wearing, because that's very risky in prison. For anyone who's familiar with prison life, if somebody comes in that would be seen as a snitch of any sort or working with the police who's wearing a wire, things could go very badly for them if word got around that they are cooperating with law enforcement. So either they had made sure that the area around Miles was clear as far as the people that were present when he was trying to confront David to get this supposed confession on tape, or Miles is just either incredibly stupid or incredibly brave if he was just in the mass population while this was taking place, because that is a very risky move in that environment. We sat down with Miles. He told us he dated David's cousin, Julia. Miles claimed that he walked in on David telling Julia that he killed Lindsay. I mean, think about that. That's a huge finger to point at someone to accuse them of admitting to confessing to a murder to Miles' own cousin that Miles just happened to walk in on David doing this, telling Julia that he killed Lindsay. So my sense was that Miles was lying. That was my sense. I felt deception in this statement. And Miles, to me, felt more and more, the more that we spoke with him, he was quite a keen manipulator. He knew what to say and how to deliver it. And he also knew how to get people on his side. So I watched him work his charm in trying to persuade us of his cause and his interpretation or his view of what happened, his recall of what he had experienced personally. So when he told us that he dated David's cousin, Julia, I wondered, why did the police not bring Julia in? Is this information common knowledge to Simi Valley PD, or are they learning this for the first time now? Which is why this podcast episode is important. If this information has never been shared with the right people, I want to make sure that since I have this platform, use it in order to be able to help move this case forward, because this case, in my opinion, is solvable. So my sense of Miles had not changed. Like, he is who he is. I get who he is. But between Miles trying to set David up in prison by wearing the wire and the story that Miles overheard his girlfriend, Julia, discussing Lindsay's murder with David, it really caused me pause. I found that Miles seemed to be very central to both pieces of information having to do with David and what David either said or knew about Lindsay's disappearance. So, 1, could the police corroborate the story of David supposedly confessing to his cousin, Julia? What happened to that lead? Did the police interview Julia? Again, where's this interview? So if Miles is a concerned citizen just trying to help solve Lindsay's disappearance, why didn't he wear a wire while confronting his friend John, who was the last person to see Lindsay? That would make sense to me. Was Miles trying to frame David for Lindsay's murder? Miles said he overheard David telling Julia, quote unquote, "I buried that bitch's body up by Whiteface Mountain." Was he lying, trying to frame David? Did Miles help John move Lindsay's body there? Have the police taken cadaver dogs out to Whiteface Mountain? Do they even have this piece of information, or are they hearing this for the first time? As far as I was aware, our investigation had been turned over to Simi Valley PD back in 2009, so I would think that this information would have been something they had received back then. My hope is sometimes turnover in a police department can put a fresh set of eyes and a fresh mind from a homicide detective that really wants closure in a homicide investigation to work the case, to pick it up, to look at it again, to care. So again, I hope that this episode of The Dead Life will inspire somebody in law enforcement out there to take this information and push it further down the road. Donna, Lindsay's mother, deserves answers. Okay, so then another piece of information that was interesting is we had, my investigator confronted Miles with saying that it had been reported that Miles may have helped move Lindsay's body, that he had told people that he saw her body and helped to move it. Is this true? Have the police, again, gone out there? Have they given Miles a lie detector test? Probably not. So I'm hoping these are another starting point for them or leads that they can follow moving forward. So I wasn't sure, was Miles trying to draw our attention away from where Lindsay's body was really buried? Or was he taking the police by saying that David helped bury her body up by Whiteface Mountain? Was he knowing that they would find Lindsay's body there and then blame David for it because Miles had come forward and given that piece of information? I think that's a lead that needs to be followed up on. We were also told that concrete was laid at Lindsay's residence within days of her going missing. So concrete was laid in the backyard. That makes you wonder. It is suspicious. If my fiance disappears, who's 9 months pregnant with my baby, I'm not looking to do some backyard construction to up the value of my home or, to do any sort of renovations. That really wouldn't be my focus. So I felt that the timing of that was strange if that information is accurate, but that's what we were told. We also had asked the people living there now, who are not John and his mother, there were other people there, if we could check out the backyard of the residence. We were interested in either bringing in sonar equipment, something to look for depressions in the earth to see maybe if someone had been buried there, if the earth had been disturbed. Their response to us was, sure, for $3,000. So the people that are living in the home that Lindsay disappeared from, that were living there in 2009 at least, were uncooperative in this case. I would think they'd want to know if there was a young woman who was 9 months pregnant buried in their backyard, but they didn't seem to be very interested in that. They were more interested in a financial payoff. So again, just so you get the energy of this case and what we were up against going into this environment, we're not dealing with the typical people who are trying to do the right thing. It was very, there was a big drug vibe in Simi Valley at the time. I don't know if they've cleaned it up since, but it was very methy, heroin energy in the town. It seems that drugs were a big problem there. So hopefully they've gotten that a little bit more under control. Anyways, so we were then also informed, and again, we were informed this and we had our own fact checkers, but I will say that as far as I know, this piece of information was true. We were told that the concrete that was laid at the residence within days of Lindsay going missing may have come from John's dad's concrete company. Did John's dad own a concrete company? Maybe. That would be something that Simi Valley police might want to follow up with as well, whether or not the person who was living with our missing pregnant 22-year-old girl, really, to me, she's a girl. She was so young, that his dad would own the town concrete company. So that was interesting considering concrete had just been laid, according to our sources. Could Lindsay and her baby be buried in the backyard? Has her body been moved in the 25 years since going missing? After 25 years, it's very hard to believe that Lindsay and her son could still be alive. I had an interesting tidbit brought up to me by someone who is interested in this particular case, and I want to share it with you just to see what your sense is. She wondered if it was possible that the baby had been born alive and sold, which was interesting that she said that because Lindsay told David's mom. So we're going back to David, the boyfriend, the father of her first child, the 3.5-year-old little girl. At the time Lindsay went missing. So David, he to me, again, he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but I don't see him as a master manipulator. I see him as a petty thief. That was more of his energy, just to give you the vibe. So Lindsay told David's mom that she was looking up adoption and didn't want to have his baby, and that she may have been looking to place that child in a home for adoption. I don't know if that's true. That's what David told us when we interviewed him, that's what Lindsay had told his mom. That might be an interesting lead for the police to also follow up on. That's the thing about this case that I don't get. There are so many leads. I can pull this apart forever, and I'd know exactly which leads I'd be following up next. I believe that the police, doing this professionally, this is what they do, would also know how to follow up leads. I thought we came up with a lot of information on this case, and we were only there for a couple of days. When my investigator pressed Miles with information that a report stated that Miles had said that he saw the body, he helped put it in a vehicle, and then he helped to bury it, Miles became very flustered. He then agreed to take a lie detector test, which I was very excited that he agreed to that because I had a very strong feeling he would fail that. He never took the lie detector test. My sense was he agreed to do that to get out of the room with us. He did not want to be there anymore. He seemed agitated and very nervous, and he had a very nervous laugh when my investigator even pressed him with that information that he saw the body and helped dispose of it. He pushed himself back in his chair and just shook his head, and he was just sort of laughing like, what? If somebody accused me of saying to someone that I was there, I saw the body, put it in my vehicle, I helped bury the body, I would have been like, seriously? Like, who told you this? I'd want to know, where'd you hear that so that I could help get to the bottom of that and discredit the person that I know is lying, because, you're being besmirched, maligned, this thing being said about you that you had been there and that you did nothing to draw attention to her body or help her. Or was Miles trying to help her in a roundabout way by continuing to say that she was buried at Whiteface Mountain, but blaming it on David because he didn't want to get in trouble, right? It's a good question. It's something that has to be considered. So Miles did not take the lie detector test. Another interesting development was that we asked David to take a lie detector test. So this is her ex-boyfriend, the father of her first child. David agreed to take the lie detector test. We asked the police not to park their patrol cars in front of the hotel where David was coming to take the test. So when we pulled up, there were patrol cars parked in front of the entrance of the hotel that we had rented the room to administer the lie detector test. So there were police cruisers, all, not unmarked vehicle, but straight up marked vehicles of the police cars parked in front of the entrance. And I thought that was strange because we were afraid of spooking David. We didn't want him to pull up, see police cars, and back off, because if he was guilty, we wanted to be able to have some lie detector results to use as some sort of baseline moving forward in the investigation of what to interview him about, or what area of his life he was having these reactions to on this test. You know, you can use it as sort of a barometer moving forward to gauge what areas people get nervous about when you start talking about it. And then you start hammering those areas of the case. So anyways, David came in, he came in and he took that test. So we hired a trained polygraph expert. He seemed very nice. My investigator and I sat there and talked to him for quite some time, waiting for David to show up. So he took the lie detector test and David passed it. He passed the lie detector test. My investigator saw it and I saw it. And when we asked the administrator of the test to sort of go through it with us, and we said, is there any way that he could have done this? He said, absolutely not. He passed the test. He was not deceptive. He didn't do this. Later that night, a very upset lie detector operator called my investigator and I, and he tried to reverse the results of the lie detector test. I'd never had that happen before. So the very same test we had witnessed and saw David pass, interesting, right? So this very same test that we were witness to, he's calling us, trying to convince us that we didn't see what we saw and he didn't say what he had said. My investigator and I found that very suspicious, confusing, infuriating. It left me with a lot of question marks around what happened to make this lie detector operator want to change his findings. Did somebody talk to him? Because I can't imagine what else it would be. We saw the results of the test with our own eyes. He walked us through the test. My investigator had been a police officer for decades and decades and is very well known in his department. And he's a very shrewd homicide detective. He was there. So even if you're not listening to me, here's somebody who actually was in law enforcement with a badge, coming into another jurisdiction with trying to work with the police that were there, sitting down with a polygraph expert that we hired and getting this reaction of panic from him. I just found it very disturbing. So David told us that he'd been asking for a lie detector test for years. For years, he'd been asking the police for a lie detector test to prove that he did not abduct or kill the mother of his child. And they wouldn't give it to him. They had access to the same resources we did. They wouldn't give it to him. I found that, to me, lie detectors are almost as important in exonerating some people, or as including others, because it can ruin people's life if they are falsely accused. Now, I know that a lie detector test is not admissible in court, but I do find it a useful instrument in interrogation and moving forward in an investigation to be able to use as a tool, as I said before. So finally, David got his lie detector test, and I want to just say here publicly, he passed it. I saw it. He passed it. I don't understand that breakdown on something so simple right there as eliminating a suspect. Why not give him the lie detector? As a matter of fact, why not give Julia a lie detector? You know, David's cousin, Miles' ex-girlfriend. Ask her if David confessed to her. Hook her up. Ask if David confessed that he killed Julia, or if he killed Lindsay. You know, wouldn't that be important to find out? What if Julia says, my cousin never said that to me? Did they even ask her so that they could dispel that piece of information of whether or not David ever even said that, because if she says, my cousin never admitted to it, and she passes that on a lie detector test and saying that he says he never killed her and he never admitted to doing something he didn't do, that never happened, then that could point a finger at Miles. So I think Julia is very important in this case. Why not hook up Miles to the lie detector test? He's such a, wanting to help sort of guy that's trying to be friendly and inject himself into this case. I would think that taking a lie detector test would be nothing for him. And if he wants one, I will happily still go down there, hire one, and he can take that test. And I know my investigator would be happy to go down there as well. What about John, the person Lindsay lived with, who shared a house with her and an unborn child? Have they hooked him up to a lie detector test? Another thought occurred to me. What did John's mom say about all of this? Because Lindsay apparently lived with not just her fiance, but she lived with his mother. What did she have to say? What did she witness? What did she see? What did she hear? Seems like there hasn't been much focus on her. And why didn't she reach out to Lindsay's mom, Donna, after this happened and say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to help bring Lindsay home? Isn't that what most human beings would do out there, especially mothers who would feel like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me think about this. Like, I want to remember every detail around Lindsay's disappearance. We have to find my grandchild. We have to find Lindsay. She probably needs medical help. Oh, Donna, how can I be there for you? Where was John's mother in all of this? So I found that very, very curious. It's been 25 years since Lindsay and her unborn child seemingly disappeared into thin air. Time would indicate that Lindsay is no longer alive, but time can be a friend. After 25 years, I'm sure there's been a lot of upheaval in Simi Valley. Maybe there are ex-girlfriends of John's now who would come forward, who maybe he threatened after Lindsay was out of the picture and they became, his paramour and broke up with him. And did he threaten them? Did he threaten to do to them maybe what he may have done to Lindsay? I'm looking at this from a lead's perspective. We don't know that John did it. We don't know for sure that David did it, but we have good evidence that he probably didn't. We know that Miles is important in this equation. So there seems to be a spotlight shined on John and his mother. As I went through this, that's my opinion. That's what I think. There needs to be a focus put on them as well as Julia, just to see if she'll corroborate the piece of information that Miles gave to us, to either determine whether Miles is just this big teddy bear that tells the truth, or if he's a snake who's good at manipulating the people around him. So, Simi Valley Police Department, there's been turnover. Maybe there's something to be learned from a new detective taking over this case, I hope. Maybe they'll check the backyard of the house Lindsay lived in. I also wonder, my sense was she would have been killed at the house. That's just my sense. So if that was the case, the theory that the baby could have been sold, I wouldn't buy, because if she was killed, that baby wouldn't have lived long afterwards. And if they did remove the baby, there would be a lot of blood in the garage, on the ground, on the walls, because pregnant women have an extraordinary amount of blood in their system when they're pregnant. And I would imagine she would have bled out quite a bit if that were the case. Did the police go into the house with luminol? Did they take a proper crime scene team in to investigate every hair fiber and crevice of that home. Did they spray luminol in the tub to see if blood may have glowed in the drain? I don't know the answers to this. So I'm asking these questions because I think all of these are good places to go back to. And even if they painted the walls, even though it's been 15 years, they could go back now and still detect it. That's the beautiful thing about forensic science and criminals. Criminals are often very stupid, and they assume that they're smarter than everyone else, and they make a lot of mistakes trying to clean up crime scenes. So I would have a lot of interest in that house and going in. So I hope that some of you out there who may have been at a bar with Miles over the years, who heard this, kind of friendly, buffoonish guy share a story of something he witnessed trying to impress you. Maybe you're an ex-girlfriend of one of these key players. Maybe you heard something. Maybe you were a drug addict back then and you've gotten clean and you have information you could come forward with. All of this I'm interested in hearing. So if any of you have reliable information from around 1999, when Lindsay Wells went missing, I want to hear from you. This is personal to me. I was sitting with my daughter, Sophia, and I know a lot of you love her on The Dead Life on my podcast. I was pregnant with Sophia when Lindsay was pregnant with her son. So they would have been born just a few months apart. And my baby got to grow up and be this flourishing, bright light out in the world, living her life. Lindsay's baby, I don't suspect, got that. One can only pray that maybe something happened. Maybe whoever did this to Lindsay took mercy on the baby, and maybe they did adopt out a live infant from Simi Valley around that time. Maybe those are records the police need to look at. Any baby boys that may have been adopted out around March of 1999. Who knows? Hopefully somebody out there will want to help bring some closure to this case. I really hope the police check out Whiteface Mountain. I really hope they go into the backyard and see if there was ever a body buried there. Even if it had been moved later, there would still most likely be some evidence of decomposition in the soil. I'm just hoping that this moves it forward because we all want answers for Lindsay's family. So if you have any information, I don't mean premonitions. I mean concrete information, exact information, something that you heard around that time or since, around Simi Valley, California, or from one of these characters that I've gone over who are, they're more than characters. They're actors in whatever happened around Lindsay Wells. Whether they were innocent or guilty remains to be seen, but I'd love to get to the bottom of this. You can call us at 802-332-3811, 302-332-3811, and leave me a message. And to all of my believers out there, don't stop believing. And Donna, we won't stop looking.
Join us next week on The Dead Life. And don't forget to subscribe now to get notified of every new episode.